Hello, everyone. It's your favorite build guide maker, Sideralis Music here, and it's been a while since I've actually done a video on medieval Minecraft, otherwise known as MMC1 Fabric version or 1.19.2, and I've got updated builds for the latest version, which is V22 here. And we've got a lot of them. There's been a lot of changes since V18.5, and I'm gonna be pretty much going over all of them for all the builds. And the latest version of the build guide, of course, is still in V20.5, but these videos are gonna get added to it, so that's gonna be a thing. But without further ado, we're going to get started with the most basic build. It's going to be the warrior build. It's going to be the melee standard build. And all the rest of the builds are going to be in different videos. This is going to be kind of a whole video series on the builds of MMC. And it's, again, going to be MMC1 Fabric 1.19.2 version 22 at the time of recording this video. Now, before we dive into these chests, I'm going to show you for both warrior builds what you're essentially going to be building in your stats. Now, I have used commands to pretty much give myself a whole bunch of skill points to play with because I need to test stuff. But you can get up to a maximum of level 200. It's really hard to get to level 200 though. It takes a lot of experience because it gets really hard to level after around level 70 or level 75. So I also find that you don't really need to level past like level 100. I think level 100 kind of feels like a final type of thing for me. But I know there's some people that like to grind, and there have been people that have grinded all the way to level 200 before. So, besides that, you can kind of hover over these stats to see what they give you, and they have been changed recently thanks to a data pack made by the data pack wizard Muon. He's very good at making data packs, and yeah, I'm very pleased with the stat changes that Muon has brought to the table, and of course I tested these myself as well in a test server, and they work pretty well. So mainly for warrior, it's going to be luckiness and strength. You can build into dexterity if you want to throughout your playthrough. It does give you attack speed, which is kind of nice. And it also actually helps your movement speed, so that can actually be useful. Movement is pretty much always useful. But keep in mind that, you know, if you're only going to level up to level 100, or even if you're going to level up to 200, you know, each point in dexterity is a point away from your damage. And of course, we're going to do 50 luckiness max, and you're going to see why that's max here in just a minute. But the first stat you're probably going to want to level up is strength. And that's because it gives you more attack damage, plus 0.25 per point. And it also gives you 5% melee crit damage now. So you're leveling up both attack damage and melee crit damage, which is really nice. And that's going to be just overall stronger than what we used to be able to do with strength before. But as you can see, armor has actually been taken away. That has now been put into Constitution. So that kind of, I don't know, that kind of makes Constitution somewhat of a useful stat now. Also, the health regeneration, which really made no sense and kind of had no business being on strength in the first place. It's on Constitution now, which makes a lot more sense. And getting magic protection and stuff, and getting armor, and just being overall tankier with Constitution just makes sense for that stat. So it's kind of a useful stat for survivability. I personally don't use it for survivability, but Some people might find it useful, but the main stat you're going to want to level up is strength. And once you got a few points in there, maybe 5 or 10, you can start leveling up luckiness. And the reason why is for crit chance. Now you're only going to want to do 50 luckiness max. And the reason why is because your crit chance goes up to 63.4%. And it will not go any higher after 50 points in luckiness. And the reason for that is something called diminishing returns. And that's because you actually start getting less and less crit chance the more points you put into luckiness. And that's made for balancing reasons, so you don't, level up a whole bunch of luckiness to get 100% crit chance, because that would just be absurd. So I find that my ideal melee stats are usually 50 luckiness and 50 strength, and I usually don't have to do any more than that. You can do 50 luckiness, maybe 20 dexterity, and 30 points in strength if you want to, because there's something called relics, which you're going to have a lot of strength anyway with relics, because it's going to push it way beyond this. But we'll go into that in just a bit. But we have our other, all of our gear that we need to get. And I have everything laid out. So we're going to start with the armor set, which is Titan's Shroud. Okay? Titan's Shroud, the reason why you get this set is because it gives 7.5% attack damage per piece and also 3.75% attack speed per piece. That equals out to 30% attack damage and 15% attack speed total when you have this full set. You also get a bonus called Titan's Shroud when wearing this full set. And what it does, it inflicts a random negative effect on whatever you're hitting, as long as you're doing damage to it. Those negative effects can include some really good ones like weakness, slowness, mining fatigue. And that can really help on some bosses and even, mobs. Although by the time you get this, you should probably be able to handle mobs pretty well. But still, it's a pretty underrated ability that a lot of people don't know about. And I find that it's very, very useful. You can also reforge this. You can read the last tutorial quest for reforging, by the way, which is this quest right here. It's the diamond, tips and tricks. And you can reforge this. This is an example of reforged Titan Shroud. This is epic rarity. The highest rarity is unique. It's pretty expensive to reforge this. Costs some amethyst, which is really easy to get, but it also costs a netherite scale. And you won't really be getting those very easily, at least up until you unlock the end. When you unlock the end, you can farm ender warthogs for netherite scales. But although that's been nerfed a little bit, but you can still do it. It's still viable. But sometimes when you reforge something, certain stats that the armor has will appear to go away, at least on the tooltip here. However, those stats are still there. I have confirmed this. In fact, I think I can confirm this right now. Right now, my attack speed, let's see. My attack speed is 4, which it should be because that's what a fist is. And maybe the attack speed will be there. Maybe it won't be because I don't actually know. I might have to be wielding a weapon. Oh, no. See, it's 4.15 now. So I am getting that 3.75% attack speed. So always be sure to actually check your stats to see if a stat is still there or not. The reason why it goes away is because tooltips can actually only show so much data on them. So some stats will appear to have gone away, but in reality, they actually haven't. So now moving on, we have our enchants. Obviously, mending is going to be the most important enchant here that you can get. So definitely trying to get 4 of those to put on all your armor. Then we have life mending. I actually kind of consider that as an option, now rather than a necessity. But if you are going to get it, you should prioritize it. It can pair really well with a lifesteal relic, and you can use it with other enchants that can heal you and stuff like that, especially if you use other stuff that can help armor durability like unbreaking. And a little known fact, protection can also help armor durability because protection also absorbs damage. And even though it doesn't absorb all damage, any amount of damage that goes into protection isn't going to your armor. And that is something that helps with durability, which can help these enchants actually heal you as well as heal any gear that has life mending. So you can have it or you cannot have it. It's really up to you. But again, if you are going to get it, I prioritize that after mending. Next, we have Bag of Souls. That is absolutely a necessity, and this is where I would prioritize it. I would prioritize it, either second or third. And you can stack it on all of your armor, and it increases the amount of experience you gain relative to the level of the enchantment. And it's actually quite a lot once you have all 4 stacked on all pieces of your armor here. So, really try to get that enchantment, especially to level up, because experience starts getting very expensive on those higher levels in Player X, and you do want to finish and complete your build. So, very important enchant to have. And it also helps out really early on, especially when adding enchants to your gear. Now there's protection. Protection used to have a cap of 20. Now it has a cap of 65, which you cannot even get in this mod pack. The highest you can get is 40, and I'll explain that in a bit. But you can combine books up to protection 5, so you can still get protection 20. You can get protection 20 a lot easier now, which is actually kind of nice. But if you do want higher levels of protection, you can actually find a structure called Mushroom Mines, which will be pictured in the build guide of the text version of it, which is just a Google Doc. I'll link it below in the description. But basically, at Mushroom Mines, there are zombies that drop gear that have protection 8. In the quest, you can read in the miscellaneous tab the grindstone quest on how to put protection 8 onto a book so you can put that on your armor. And since the protection cap has been raised, you can actually get 4 protection 8s and have protection 32 if you want that. Although I do find that protection 20 is enough. So that's kind of up to you if you want to overlevel or not. And then, of course, the way you get protection 40 is you find a Coliseum. A Coliseum is a structure that looks exactly like a giant Coliseum. The things that gladiators used to fight in. And there's a spawner that spawns a Phantom Rider that has that can sometimes drop gear that has protection 10 on it. So you can get protection 40 if you want. It's a pretty good sized grind if you want to get protection 40, but it's there. But you don't have to. You can just combine books and get protection 20 if you want to as well. Then there's Berserker's Fury 3. I find that this is a really good enchantment early game and mid game. However, by late game, it can get phased out, and I will go over how that happens later on. But basically what happens when you have this enchant is that when you take damage, you will always take the first hit, and it will always do around 4 to 6 hearts of damage. It depends on how much protection you have and whatnot. But you also get the buffs of Strength 3, Speed 3, and Resistance 3. Those are some really, really, really powerful buffs. Like, insanely powerful. So, like, just for getting hit. And you probably won't get hurt again, especially if you have Proc 20. So that just means that you're going to be absolutely wrecking mobs. You're definitely going to be punishing them for hitting you. And it's a nice enchantment to have. It's really powerful. But like I said, it can get phased out late game, and I'll go over that. But it is a chest-only enchantment. It only goes on the chest. It does not stack on anything else, and it does not go on anything else. So just keep that in mind. If you do want to remove it in the future, there's something called a prismatic cobweb. It's really easy to craft. and you can use this to remove curses. Berserker's Fury 3 counts as a curse enchant, and that's because it does have a negative effect, even though it has positives as well. Life Mending is actually the same way, so you can use a Prismatic Cobweb to remove Life Mending if you want to, if you find it and you don't want it. Alright, so next we have Unbreaking. It can combine all the way up to 5 now, which is really nice. Of course, the max you can get from villagers are vanilla, so you would have to combine 2 Unbreaking 3 for Unbreaking 4, then 2 Unbreaking 4s for Unbreaking 5. So you would need 4 Unbreaking 3s to essentially get an Unbreaking 5, but that also really helps with durability. You can have it, you cannot have it. It's really up to you. I find Unbreaking 3 with Mending and Life Mending and Protection to be enough, but Unbreaking 5 might also be nice as well. And for some of the later builds, it can actually be really nice because there's some robes and stuff like that have a lot less durability. So, moving on to the next enchantment, we have Deflect, and this can go on any armor piece, but it does not stack if you have more than one. So don't put it on more than one armor piece. Just put it on one piece if you are going to use this. This is kind of a more optional enchant, but it does help protect against arrows like a lot. But Luckiness also has the evasion stat, which works just like the crit chance that I talked about, except it's just protection from projectiles. You get that 63.4% chance when you have 50 luckiness. So maybe you need Deflect, maybe you don't. I think it's more important in PvP than anything else. But it can be nice to have, especially if you find it early on, and it can combine up to 4. Moving on, we have Fire Focus. Pretty straightforward what this does. Increase amount of damage done by fire attacks, especially Fire Aspect. You're probably going to have Fire Aspect on your swords if you decide to use it. So Fire Focus can help that. And it works exactly like Deflect. It can go on anything, except it does not stack, so only put it on one thing. Thorns, pretty obvious what Thorns does. We should all know what that does. And it stacks, and it can combine up to 5. You can use it, you cannot use it. Again, these later enchants are also later priority, so I consider these 4 to be like kind of the big ones. Maybe not even life mending if you choose not to use it, and again, that one can get phased out. But there is Thorns if you want to use it, and you won't really have to worry about durability issues when you have just mending, let alone everything else. And then there's Burning, which is just a fiery version of Thorns. Thorns can go up to 5, Burning can go up to 4. So, and yes, they stack. So that's pretty much all of the main enchants for armor. There is an optional enchant, which is Magic Protection 7. There's 2 magic protections in the game, so you're going to want to use the one that has this definition right here and can combine up to 7. But it cannot combine with the protection enchant, so you might find yourself using this if you have, I don't know, maybe 2 Prot 10s or 3 Prot 10s and you have just a spare slot, and you just decide that you want a little bit of magic protection. Or you might create a different armor set specifically to fight magic-based mobs or the magic-based boss known as Archmagus. You don't have to fight Archmagus as a warrior just because it doesn't have anything useful for your build, for this specific build. But, you could fight him, for honor and glory. That is kind of a thing that warriors do. So, yeah, that's going to be magic protection. And it's optional. It can stack, up to 4 times. I'm not sure what the cap on it is. I would just use all 4 just to see if it helps against Archmagus, depending on when you fight them, if you fight them. So, yeah. Then we have an experience gain setup, which is, separate from your main armor. You don't have to use the Soul Dancer robes to, level up all the way to level 100 if you don't want to. Um, you might want to use them if you're going to level up to 200, though, because with the Soul Dancer's experience buff, which you get with a full set, you get 100% experience gain. And that multiplies with everything else. So, like Bag of Souls, and all the other experience enchants that we're going to go over. And of course, you're going to want to use at least these enchants right here. And again, of course, life mending optional. You're probably going to want to use Unbreaking because they're robes and they have lower durability. And that's really all that's kind of necessary on these. But yeah, Bag of Souls is a big one. And you also have Soul Dancer's Grace, which is really cool because it's a 30% chance to completely evade any attack, as far as I know. And it's pretty cool when that triggers. It's basically like the thing that would usually happen even on a boss. When it triggers, it just doesn't happen, and you know that it triggered, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. So, yeah, I like this armor set. I've used it once. It's pretty nice. And then there's the Lapis backpack, which you should always wear because it gives you a chance to multiply the amount of experience. So always wear that in combat. Then there's a separate weapon setup that you can do. Um, I usually dual wield one-handed weapons, and then I have a two-handed weapon for my experience gain setup, just to make things easier for me. Because otherwise, I would have to do another dual wield setup just for the experience gain setup, and that would just be more enchanting, which costs more experience. So that's why I kind of do one weapon for my experience gain setup, and then I have my main setup. And the reason why is Knowledge of Ages. That's because enemy drops are directly converted to experience. So you're not getting any loot, but you're just getting more experience because all that loot just becomes experience. So that's why Knowledge of Ages is just really good for gaining XP. And it also can combine with looting, which you get more loot from mobs, which means more experience. And then you can double up again because with Scavenger 3, there's a chance that mobs can reroll their loot table twice. So that's really nice. And then, of course, you'll use all the weapon enchants plus this for your experience gain setup. So, to go over the differences of damage dealer versus tank, which I call the damage dealer the Juggernaut, and then, of course, I call the survivability absorbing damage build the tank, is that we just simply have a different armor set. This basically, if you were to get hit, you only take 10% of the damage of it, which is effectively minus 90%. It's a 90% damage reduction, which is like insanely good to have this set on its own. That's what Adamantine Guard is. But the way you get this set is very RNG. The best way to do it is to get a bunch of blacksmith villagers, and then you're going to want to do kind of a raid farm around them. So you're going to want to constantly complete raids. And then the blacksmith villagers will drop a random armor piece from either MC Story Mode armors or MC Dungeons armors. I think there's a lot that they can drop, as far as I know. I don't know the complete ins and outs of it, but you can get this full set, but it's a grind. But I mean, Warrior is kind of a grindy build anyway. And then, yeah, it's one of the best armor sets in the game just because of the crazy damage reduction it has. So, hence the word, tank and absorbing damage and survivability. And of course, the enchants will remain the same. Stormix Shield is also really good because it gives you +2 magic protection, which is nice. And there are some enchants that you can use on it, and of course, it would be ideal for a tank. Magical Rebuke, you cast your main hand spell upon blocking direct attackers. Warriors do have quote-unquote spells that they can use from something called Wartomes, which we'll go over a little bit later. But yes, you can cast that automatically when you block an attack, so that's pretty nice. You can also basically get thorns, but for shields. It's called reflective defenses. When a mob hits your shield, there's a chance that you can harm the mob. So that's pretty cool. And then there's Shield Bash, which it says empowers damage done by shields. It's not actually you bashing with your shield, but it just improves this damage from this enchant even further. So, moving on, we have weapons. The two types of weapons, again, are one-handed weapons and two-handed weapons. I like dual-wielding one-handed weapons just because it's more attack speed and it's generally more consistent damage overall, so you get more damage per second out of dual-wielding generally. But the two-handed weapons have their place. They swing slow, but they also hit hard. There is a specific enchant that is pretty good for those, for that kind of playstyle. So we'll go over everything though. Oh, and two-handed weapons typically have longer reach. So mending, of course, life mending, optional, but of course prioritize it after mending if you're going to get it. Then you have a choice between leeching and radiance because they're incompatible, but both are actually pretty good to have. It just depends on which one you want. Mob health is kind of scaled a lot higher in this mod pack. So leeching can actually be very good against mobs. So it can be a very good starter enchant to have because you basically are going to heal to full when killing mobs because they have so much health. And that can also work to really help out life mending on your gear, as well as healing you, as well as healing the damage done from Berserker's Fury. So it all kind of combos together. But there's also Radiance, which also combos as well. It can be really good against mobs as well, but it's even better against bosses because it's a chance to spawn, Healing Cloud around the target, which the Healing Cloud is just a lingering pool of regeneration. And you can actually spawn quite a lot of them, especially if you're dual wielding. Yeah, I really like Radiance. I typically prefer it. But that doesn't mean that I don't like leeching. There are plenty of times where I'll use leeching, especially at the beginning of the game to help me out. So both of these enchants are good. It's just that they're incompatible with each other. So you are going to have to choose. Or you might end up using both during a playthrough, like myself. So there's that. Oh, and one other thing about dual wielding that I forgot is that there's something called iframes, which are invincibility frames that mobs have, which basically makes it to where you can't immediately hit the mob after hitting it again. Dual wielding breaks that, meaning that you can actually do that, which means that you can hit a mob even more than you normally would be able to hit them. That's really nice. Yet another enchant that helps you with XP gain. It multiplies experience gain from a kill. It's really good to have. A lot of people always ask, is Soul Devourer better or is Soul Siphon better? Well, Soul Devourer is better because it's a multiplication. Soul Siphon only adds and it's only very small, but Soul Devourer is a lot better. So I would stick with that one. And another thing about enchants is that if you're dual wielding, you're gonna want it. You're gonna want these enchants, all these enchants on both your weapons. So yeah, because you can kill with both weapons. So if you only had Soul Devourer 3 on one weapon, let's say your offhand doesn't have Soul Devourer 3 and your offhand weapon is the thing that gets the kill, Soul Devourer won't trigger. Because Soul Devourer isn't on that weapon, and that's the weapon that got the kill. At least that's how I understand it. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think I am. During many tests, I've had to have both enchants on both weapons. So then, of course, we have Unbreaking, which is pretty straightforward. We have Sweeping Edge, which is usually straightforward, but there's something a little bit different about Sweeping Edge in this mod pack, particularly because Better Combat is in this mod pack. And Better Combat does lots of things. Of course, it lets you dual wield. It has a set range, attack range for every weapon. It's what makes it to where you can just hold left click and swing rather than having to do the whole timing of swings like normal vanilla Minecraft. But for a balance update that they did a while back, it made it to where if you're hitting multiple mobs, which you can do with a full combat bar, which you always have full combat bar essentially with Better Combat. If you hit multiple mobs and you don't have Sweeping Edge, 100% of your weapon will not, the damage from your weapon will not be 100% full on the mobs to the side that get hit. You would need Sweeping Edge 3 to actually make it to where your weapon is dealing full damage to all the mobs that you are hitting at once. And then, of course, I guess Sweeping Edge 5 would increase that even more. So yeah, Sweeping Edge, kind of important, kind of not. I can actually play around and, kite single targets and not really have a problem without Sweeping Edge, but Sweeping Edge is still a nice enchant to have. And then, of course, there's Fire Aspect, which we've pretty much gone over. It lights mobs on fire. If you're going to use it, get Fire Focus. So now, we come to what I call the big damage enchant options. Now, just like these enchants here, these enchant options are incompatible with each other. So you can create many different setups, or you can create only one setup that you prefer to have, or you can have a couple different setups throughout your playthrough, like your main setup just like changes throughout your playthrough. So I have area of effect setups right here. I have an all-arounder right here. And then I have the big damage enchants, which are probably going to be used on bosses and is typically some late game stuff. So we have Echo and Thundering. Echo has a smaller area of effect, only dealing damage in an area of 3 blocks, but it deals 100% of that damage, and it has a 55% chance to trigger. So basically, since it deals 100% of the damage, that means that if you crit, Echo is also going to crit all those mobs if it triggers. That's pretty good. The only thing that it doesn't actually trigger on, or that it doesn't hit, is the actual target that you're fighting. It will hit the mobs around it, but it will not hit the actual target that you're fighting. The AoE enchants also do not work on bosses, by the way. But you can use them with sharpness, and they're really good against mobs. Thundering only has a 20% chance to trigger, but the area of effect is relative to the level of the enchant. So if you combine 2 Thundering 3s to make Thundering 4, what ends up happening is that you have a 20 block radius. That's a lot of lightning bolts. It can actually get kind of loud and kind of ridiculous, but it is a fun enchant, and it is a lot of damage. It does 100% of your damage, just like Echo, so if you crit, that means that a bunch of lightning bolts are coming down and critting at that 20 block radius, and you can use it with sharpness as well, so that's really nice. The only downside is that when you you can walk into your own lightning bolt, which is pretty funny. If you're not careful. Another big thing is that I think it'll hit all entities, so it'll even hit friendly stuff, and it can be really loud. And it it can also, I think it turns like dirt or something like that into lava. So I can see why people might not want to use this enchant, but I can also see why some people would want to use this enchant. And it does also work on the target that you're fighting. So it hits the target that you're fighting, and It has a wider AoE, and it does the same amount of damage as this one. So I can see why people might want it, but there are some ridiculous things about it too as well. And it does not work on bosses. I've already checked. So there's Shockwave. Shockwave does less damage than these, but it works on bosses. So you kind of have an AoE enchant and a single target damage enchant here. It can also be used with sharpness. So that's pretty nice. And it has an area of 3 blocks. And it has a 55% chance to trigger, so it triggers more than Thundering. It triggers just as much as this one. And it works on the stuff that you're fighting. It just deals less damage, I think. So it's pretty nice to have, though. I like it. But now we get to the big damage enchants. And these, well, this one can be more of an early game enchant if you really want to go for it. Or it can be more of a mid game enchant because when you have more powerful gear, this enchant is a lot more prevalent because it deals multiplicative damage. It's a chance to deal multiplicative damage, and it's based on the level of the enchant. Void Strike 4 is 8 times damage. Yeah, you heard that right. 8 times damage when it triggers. Although it's a very low chance to trigger. That's why it's kind of good on stuff that doesn't swing a whole lot but hits really hard, so that when it does trigger, you just deal massive amount of damage. It can still be really good on stuff that swings faster and, dual wielding setups. But I find that this enchant is a little bit more consistent for that, and I'll go over that. But yes, Void Strike 4 is kind of like the gambling DPS mechanic. It's like you could end up with a crazy amount of DPS, but only if you get lucky on the amount of times it can trigger. But it's still a really good enchant to have. It does not work with sharpness, though. It also is, of course, incompatible with the other big damage enchant, which is Enigma Resonator. Enigma Resonator is for sure late game because you ideally want to use it when you don't need experience anymore for anything else, because it deals damage relative to the amount of XP that you have, and you don't really want that fluctuating too much. So I find that the really good amount of XP to have to where you're dealing more consistent DPS than Void Strike 4 is 500 levels, which is actually pretty easy to get if you beat a boss called Conjunctivitis and you have like an XP gain set up, like a minimum of this, and Bag of Souls. You don't even really need this, but you can if you want. And 500 levels is because Enigma Resonator does not have a chance to trigger, you're always dealing 176% amount of damage with 500 XP levels. That's an extra 175.6%, by the way. And I find that it beats this about 7 out of 10 times or so when you have this enchant. So this enchant can be more consistent. At 1,000 levels, it's about 200%. So you can kind of see that you can kind of see that, it takes the more and more XP you get, the less damage you do deal, but it will always add some amount of damage to that. Because it's a logarithmic formula. It basically makes it to where your damage can't get too sky high, but yes, it can be more consistent than Void Strike 4. So I like this enchant a lot, and it's probably my favorite damage enchant to have. So next we move on to the Wartomes that I was talking about earlier. The Wartomes have abilities that you can cast as a warrior, and I find that for the damage dealer, there's like 3 specific good ones to have. That's going to be Acrobat's Wartome, Juggernaut Wartome, and Warrior Wartome. Let's see if it... Oh, that's the wrong one. Alt, please. Yes, there we go. Okay, so tactical dive. You dive forward, which it looks weird in first person, but in third person, it actually shows you doing like a dive roll forward. You will parry any incoming attacks if you time it right, of course. And then if you do time it right, you get a successful parry. You perform a counter attack that deals 1.5 times your melee damage. This can be really strong. It can actually even work on some bosses' attacks. So it's just really powerful to have. It's almost like it kind of reminds me like of Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Um, and I think it's a good thing to learn regardless for combat mechanics. So it can help out a lot. And I think it might even kind of sort of help with mobility a little bit. I'm not sure if you have to have a target or not to cast it, or you just like constantly can roll forward. Not really sure about that, but yeah. Courage, you passively gain up to resistance 3. Okay, that's pretty cool, especially since Berserker's Fury is a thing. You gain 1 level every 4 seconds. Okay. Getting hit makes you lose a level of resistance. That's cool because with Berserker's Fury 3, getting hit makes me gain resistance 3. So there's that. You can also right click immediately to gain resistance 3 when you have the spell selected. And of course, it won't passively work when it's on cooldown when you instant cast that. But I like using it passively a lot more. And even if you do get hit and you lose a level, you gain it back in 4 seconds. So you can do some timing to where you don't even have to have Berserker's Fury 3 anymore. There's also another reason later on that you won't have to have Berserker's Fury 3. So yeah, Courage is nice to have. Bone Shatter. You can slam your weapon on the ground. You'll deal 2 times melee damage to enemies in an area, which is kind of nice. I'm not sure what that area is. I think it might be an area of like 3 blocks. But you also gain stacking momentum, which increases attack damage and spell haste. Now, you don't really need spell haste for this specific build, but increasing attack damage is nice. However, you do take 1 physical damage per level of momentum. However, this can be really nice for something like Radiance because regeneration effects, not instant healing effects, but regeneration effects, only work on stuff like life mending if you are hurt and there is something to heal. Right? Like you have to be hurt in order for it to have something to heal. And if it has something to heal, then regeneration can work on stuff that has life mending. And if you're constantly taking 1 physical damage per level of momentum, then guess what? You can heal your stuff with Radiance. Probably pretty consistently. So yeah, Bone Shatter is just nice all around to have. I like that one a lot. And then Endurance works almost just like Courage from the other book. Upon being hit, you gain a level of regen, and it's up to 4 for 2 seconds. You can use immediately to get regen 4, but it doesn't passively work on cooldown. It's only 2 seconds, so I would just get hit and use it passively. I would probably almost never cast it, and I would just use Bone Shatter. And again, regeneration, helps with that momentum and being able to like heal your stuff with life mending should you choose to do that. So that's pretty cool. Which means that you might not need a lifesteal relic, which means more damage. And then we come to the Warrior Wartome, which has everyone's favorite ability, Whirlwind. You spin, dealing 3 times melee damage to nearby enemies. It's basically like Garen from League of Legends. You just spin to win. And then there is a penalty for hitting multiple enemies, but that's only for spell on hit effects. That's meaning if you have spells that are going off when you hit enemies, they get a lot less damage than they normally would. However, warriors don't have to worry about that because you don't have spell on hit effects, I'm pretty sure. So you can also press shift to stop moving. And the cool thing about this is that you constantly sprint forward when you're using this ability. So you can, since the cooldown is proportional to usage, you can use it for mobility, for getting around. You can also use it in the water and you fly like a torpedo, and it's pretty awesome. And since the cooldown is proportional to usage, You can't quite spam it, but you can almost spam it. So that's nice. And then when fighting mobs, you can kind of do some movement play with pressing shift and letting go of shift to pretty much use it really, really well. That would be kind of like a way to master this ability. So play around with it. It's really good. It's really powerful. There's also another powerful ability, Determination. You give yourself a bunch of combat buffs, which I think is Regeneration 3, Haste 3, and I think Strength 3. I think. It basically gives you some stuff that Berserker's Fury is missing, which is pretty nice. But it also works like a Totem of Undying. So when you die and this is off cooldown, meaning that you didn't instant cast it, um, it'll revive you like a Totem of Undying. It incurs a longer cooldown, which the normal cooldown is 30 seconds. The longer cooldown, I think, is 1 minute. And it applies the same buffs that you would get that I just mentioned, also for 8 seconds. But then after those 8 seconds, you also take heavy damage, so you better make sure you're at, a good amount of health so you can take that damage so you don't die again. Because if you die again, it's not going to revive you again. But it's still pretty cool having a built-in Totem of Undying. I really like that one a lot. So yeah, experiment with these three. Maybe you end up making all three. Maybe you don't. In a future video, I'll show how to make spell books. It's really, really easy. It's just a book and a spellbinding table, just like weapons used to be, but for books. So these are some of my favorite weapons. You can just kind of read what they are here. Like just pause the video and read them. They're my favorites just for different reasons. Sometimes longer range. Sometimes they just deal a lot of damage. They have cool animations. I think chakrams are probably one of the most underrated weapons just because you throw them. It's actually like a mid-range weapon. It has 5 attack range. So that's why it has so much attack range, because you throw it. They're very slow with that -3 attack speed. But again, attack speed can be overcome by many different things. And I do believe they go through mobs. It works similar to piercing, I think. So chakrams are really cool. And every single weapon from the Simply Swords mod, now that this has been added to the game, which changes Warrior a lot, all of these weapons can be found as loot, which means that they will be scaled up to stuff greater than you can craft, which is really nice. That's due to a mod called Dungeon Difficulty. It scales up loot in dimensions, as well as scaling up mobs and bosses in other dimensions. Obviously, the end is going to have the best loot, and there's a boss called Sideralis that drops these unique weapons that will be the best loot in the game for this specific build. But yeah, chakrams for the win for the regular weapons. And then if you want to, you can, if you either find or craft a netherite version of one of these, you can upgrade it even further in the smithing table with a runic tablet. You'll get a random runic power. And you can read all about this stuff in the Runic Grimoire. Now, these are some of my favorite unique Simply Swords weapons. And I would like to say that all the weapons from Simply Swords weapons count as swords for enchanting purposes. Even the axes do, as far as I know. So that's something that's really good to know. You can read all these. Just pause the video, read what they do. All of these are my favorite for different reasons. A lot of their right-click abilities don't work right now, and that's due to spell books, but that'll be fixed in a future update. They basically need the same blacklist that Miriam's Souls-like weaponry needed when the change to Spell Engine was first introduced to MMC and to that mod. So I think one of my big favorites is Soulpire. I also really like Shadow Sting. I like dual wielding these two for the buffs that they give, and then I also like dual wielding these two. Now, when you loot a Simply Swords weapon, they can now come with different gem slots. You have a chance of getting either a rune socket or another rune socket, or sorry, a rune socket or another socket, or you can get both. And it's all RNG, it's all random. If you get something you don't like, you can smelt it down for an empowered remnant. An empowered remnant combined with a runic tablet will give you a rune fused gem that has a random runic power, just like the regular runic tablets here. Some of my favorite, well, one of my favorite runic powers is Imbue, which makes your weapon deal bonus magic damage, and we all know magic damage goes through armor, so that's pretty cool. And you can get greater Imbue. You can get greater on any one of the runic powers, so greater Imbue probably the best one. But I got greater swiftness. Chance on hit to increase your wielder's movement speed for a duration. Honestly, not bad. I'll take it. It's greater, and it's movement speed. I like movement speed. I like playing around with movement. However, there's also the nether gems. Okay? And there's a lot of... there's a few different ones. I guess that one would be okay for like a server. Maybe the tank could have something like this. It's more of a support. There's one that's called Echo, which I really like because it gives a chance for your weapon to actually deal or to swing again, to basically hit twice. And that second hit will be unmitigated damage, which I'm pretty sure means it goes through armor. So you can combine that with greater Imbue and have a crazy, crazy weapon. Not only that, there's also another fused gem called Berserk, which I'm pretty sure just straight up adds lifesteal to your weapon. So that's pretty cool. It's either that or it's a chance for lifesteal, but either way, pretty cool. And again, you have to smelt Simply Sword weapon down, or the unique Simply Swords weapons down for empowered remnants. So you can farm the Ender Dragon at in-game for a 50% chance for it to drop a unique. You can also farm up Sideralis for that same chance at in-game. So that's pretty much what in-game is going to be. It's going to be grinding for these and then trying to get the gems that you want. So, moving on to relics. You're going to be doing percent strength. You really want probably around plus 40, plus 30 or greater can be acceptable. The max is plus 50. I would take something like this though because it does give me 19% attack speed, and that 28 is pretty close to plus 30. And then you're gonna want, if you're not using a lifesteal relic, you're gonna want 4 of these percent strength relics, and then you're gonna want 1% melee crit chance relic. And this one's pretty good because I'm pretty sure the max on crit chance relics now is 30. And plus 25%, that's pretty close to 30. So there you go. You can affix relics to your armor, but of course you can only do chest and head. There's no leg and boot relics, and you affix them to the chest piece and the head piece through a smithing table. It can only be done once. It cannot be undone. It cannot be overwritten by another relic, so you have to be really, really careful when you're doing this. And it can only work on crafted gear, because the dungeon difficulty stuff that adds stats to items overrides everything, and they cannot be touched by reforging or relics. So you're going to want to make sure to craft your armor, or at least craft the chest and the headpiece, so that you can actually affix your relics to it. And by craft, I mean fully craft, from the ground up. Because this armor upgrades with netherite ingots from the dark armor. This armor also upgrades from netherite ingots from, I think, the soul robes. So, you know, kind of expensive, and you don't want to waste stuff. So make sure that you craft your armor, and that when you look for weapons, you actually loot your weapons. So the idea is crafting armor and looting weapons. So we move on to useful backpacks. I'll let you read what they do. They're all these four I find are pretty nice. And also the Lapis backpack as well. Provides seeing in the dark. That just means it. I wonder what that is. Uh, anyways, it provides seeing in the dark, which is just night vision, and it says obtainable in mine shafts and dungeons. The one dungeon I can always find it in is again a mushroom mines, which is pretty important. So, if you find a mushroom mines, yeah, you can get this backpack. And the mushroom mines is above ground, by the way. Squid Traveler's Backpack, of course, is really good because underwater breathing and night vision while being underwater. I like that with swimming. That is not to be underestimated. It can be very, very useful having one of these. Now we move on to stuff that gives us buffs that can help us, which are basically, you can consider artifacts, I guess. There's the Fist of Fury, which is pretty easy to craft. You can read the Grimoire to read all about Archon. This thing gives you, when you right click it, gives you the Rage buff, which increases your attack speed by quite a lot. And it can be really useful like against bosses and stuff like that. So again, this could be one reason why you don't need Dex, but it's always up to you. The Deathcat Mushroom does something similar. When you right click, you get Haste 4, which is pretty freaking nice. And, you know, that's even more than what Determination actually gives you. So, and it gives you that buff for longer than Rage. So these two together can be really useful. Then there's different potion charms you can make. There's all kinds of different ones. This is one of the best ones though, Charm of Absorption 4. Again, you can only you right click to activate it, and you can only have one active in your inventory at a time, and it has to be worn in the charm slot, which is going to be this slot when you open your inventory in survival, the one that has the book next to it. And what this one does, it gives you basically 8 extra hearts, and it does constantly refresh, so you're basically almost always going to have 8 extra hearts. You're really, really strong with that, but the Obsidian boss can actually kill you through that. So just, you know, be careful on the Obsidian boss. Just remember as much as you have grinded and as strong as you get, you're almost always never invincible. So just keep that in mind. But still, this is a really strong charm to have, and there are other strong charms you can make as well, and you can look up how to make those. They will be made specifically with the potion that, you know, the effect is. So to make a Charm of Absorption 4, you would need 3 potions of Absorption 4 and some Blaze Powder. So, for example. They all have durability. This one only triggers durability when you actually hit something with it. So basically, don't hit something with it, but they can all be enchanted with Unbreaking, Mending, and Life Mending. There's also something called the Hardening Catalyst, which apply in an anvil to make any item unbreakable. That's really good to have pretty much for everything. It can be expensive to make, though. 2 shulker shells, 2 netherite ingots, and a nether star. So you'll be grinding to make a lot of these if you want to make these, but they can be useful specifically for these items and for some other items in the game. Now for the final reason that Berserker's Fury can finally be phased out by endgame. The Riot Gauntlet. It grants permanent strength. However, it costs 2 netherite ingots and a gleaming compound. That's pretty expensive, especially when you look at how expensive a gleaming compound is. A lot of us didn't really feel that the means justified the end here, so instead of granting permanent strength, it now grants permanent strength 4. That's going to be the strongest buff that you can get in the game as far as physical damage goes. So that can actually phase out Berserker's Fury 3, especially if you're using something especially if you're using like courage, or even if you have a resistance 2 charm that you can make. Yeah, Riot Gauntlet is really, really nice to have. It's you're gonna want to create that. The Broken Watch, you can read something called the Almanac from Things. Almanac. Yes. You can read this thing and you can look up how to craft it. It's the Things Almanac, and it tells you all about every single trinket, and it tells you how to craft this because this one has a unique crafting recipe that the REI is not going to show. But this increases status effect duration by 50%. That's pretty nice considering that we have a lot of stuff that can give us effects. So, yeah, that endurance, that regeneration 4 can actually go up to 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds. That's actually kind of nice. And of course, other stuff as well. Even the lingering pools dealing, not necessarily being around longer, but giving us the effect for longer because 50% duration. So there's that. There's the Icarus wings, which basically in this particular build look really cool. At Icarus to view everything from that mod. There's a lot of different wings you can create, and they're basically all for looks. There's the special wings right here that you can create. There's light wings, which don't look like their picture here. I'll show you how they look in a bit. But basically, with this armor, you're not really going to notice much of an effect outside of a normal elytra. However, with something like this, that doesn't give you a whole lot of armor. Or at least, maybe with something like this. You can basically just take off. You can press Control W, look up, and you can take off into the sky. And of course, pressing double space. You don't need like fireworks or any boosters to actually help you out, which is pretty nice. But then there's the empty agglomeration, which can combine 2 trinkets that share at least 1 slot, which is pretty nice. You cannot combine like 2 rings together, so you cannot combine 2 relics from Relic X together, but you can combine, say, a necklace from Relic X and maybe one of the necklaces from Things, which are pretty useful. So this is a useful item to have. It's optional though, and it's very, very expensive to make. And no, you cannot combine 2 charms to have 2 charms active at once. But it's still a useful item to have regardless. And then there's the monocle, which grants permanent night vision. And I think that's about it. We have the same Wartomes here, Juggernaut and Warrior for the tank, but there's also another one called the Phalanx one, which I think will probably be your main one. It has courage, just like the Acrobat one, but this one, specifically opportunity attack, you cast that, you raise your shield and weapon in defensive stance. You block attacks from the front. If an enemy moves in front of you, it and nearby enemies are dealt 2 times melee damage. And so this one just kind of screams tank. And yeah, that's basically it. Oh, and another thing about fighting Magus, not only magic protection, but you can use Smite. You can use Smite with these enchants as well here instead of Sharpness if you want. Maybe you can use Smite and Sharpness, I don't know. But the thing about Archmagus is that he has a shield that has a lot of resistance, and Smite is something that really helps shred Archmagus' shield down. So while Archmagus himself isn't weak to Smite, his shield actually is. So make sure if you are going to fight Archmagus with melee, use Smite. And you can combine it all the way up to 7. So yeah, that's about it. Next time we're going to get into Archer. And that's going to be a fun build because we have a new and exciting bow. That is undoubtedly the most powerful bow. So yeah, look forward to that. I'm also going to be doing build demonstration videos at pretty much each stage of the game, doing different various things, and of course at in-game testing on Ipsidolith to see how an in-game build works. And let me show you just how much strength you can actually get. Oh, and why to actually get a melee crit damage relic. I don't need the lifesteal relic, but... So... yeah. 138 strength. So we just went from 50 to 138 with the relics that I showed you that gives strength. Not only that, but our crit chance can actually be pushed past the normal cap of 50 luckiness and actually go to 70%, which I find is perfectly acceptable. Now, we get a little bit less crit damage than we used to. 700% or greater used to be my minimum, but now it can be this. And the reason why is that my fist now deals 35.5 attack damage. That's on its own. This is without Titan's Shroud. That's insane that my fist can actually deal that much damage. And if I do a crit, I crit for 648% times that. So, yeah, that's pretty gnarly. That's just my fist. Yeah, like if we take out a weapon here, like, I don't know, Soulpire. Well, that. And this is just a crafted version of it. I just went to 47.5 with this much crit damage. So yeah, we get more attack damage and more DPS than we've ever gotten before. And that's really good because magic itself has actually been nerfed. So warrior and archer got a pretty nice buff while magic got nerfed, which actually really helps to balance stuff because it used to be, you know, it used to be not as fast. So, but yeah, that's all for now. And until the next video, which is going to be Archer. Oh, I'm still wearing my relics, but sorry. As you can see, these are the light wings. This is another thing I forgot to mention. Sorry. You can use an agglomeration in the elytra slot, and you can actually combine two different wings together to create your own wings. So this is the Discord wings combined with the white light wings, which I find to be pretty cool. So yeah. Oh, and another thing about relics is that you can actually wear them. You can put enchants on them. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You can affix them anyway. You'll lose the enchants, but it's pretty easy to get enchants back. So that is something that I would actually do. If you find a really strong relic, I would actually wear that until you're ready to put it on Titan Shroud. Okay, that was the last thing. So until next video, I will see you guys later.